At the start of every new year, there's this unspoken pressure to make a big declaration, a bold plan, a reinvention. But I want to gently challenge that expectation. From what I'm seeing and from what I'm hearing from many of you, this year already feels layered. There's momentum, but there's also fatigue. There's optimism, and at the same time, a real desire to do things differently, to work, live, and lead with more intention and less noise. And that's where I want to begin today. This is Luci Gabel, integrative leadership coach and trainer, author, speaker, and COO of BioNec Tech and SmartRx.ai, and your host on leadership, life, health, and happiness. Before we get into it, if you listen to this podcast regularly and find these conversations helpful, I'd love for you to subscribe or follow the show. There are many of you out there listening without subscribing, and that small action is the easiest way you can support this work and help these conversations reach the people who need them. Over the past few months, my own leadership landscape has shifted. I've stepped into a COO role at a startup that brings together biotech and AI with a very real emphasis on human dignity. That means more responsibilities, more decision making, and more complexity. And I've continued my work at the intersection of health, physiology, and leadership education. What's interesting is instead of pulling me away from this work, this new role is grounding me even more. As we grow, leadership gets more complex. There's more responsibility, more decisions, more people impacted by the choices we make. And what I keep being reminded of is the fundamentals matter more than ever. Energy, clarity, regulation, rhythm, the ability to think well under pressure, and the ability to recover from that pressure. Not performance theater, not doing more just so we can say we've done more. That old era of sleeping less, ignoring ourselves, and wearing exhaustion as a badge of honor, that's gone. What's front and center now is learning how to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of the things that matter. Before I share a personal story about that, there's one more observation I want to name, especially in this new year moment. As a collective, I'm hearing more honest conversations about the fact that meaningful change takes time. And that's a good thing. I've watched that play out for over 25 years in my own life and in the lives of people I've coached and taught. We step into change with the hope that it'll happen quickly, and sometimes it does. But more often, real change requires many steps. Just like a startup company, it'll involve trial and error. It'll involve getting information from what we try, and then adjusting, and then trying again. And that process takes time. Not just time to practice new patterns, but time to figure out what patterns actually work for you. And this is just how life works. And the more we accept that things unfold in their own timing, the less we feel we need to force things and rush things, and the better outcomes tend to be. I recently heard a very successful United States business leader say something that stuck with me. He said, first, you've got to get the process right. And then, and only then, do you double down and scale it. And that's so you don't waste a lot of time and energy and money scaling something that doesn't actually work. And that's exactly what I talk about in the first chapter of Eat to Lead, which you can download at eattolead.com. The chapter focuses on decision-making and starting strong It applies whether you're making changes at work, at home, or in your health. I think everyone could use that chapter in their life. And this idea is showing up really clearly in the conversations right now around the US dietary guidelines that have recently been released. Without getting pulled into the noise, the guidelines themselves remain largely consistent and grounded in science. What's changed is the volume of the debate and the polarization is greater around this conversation. You see, controversy sells, extremes get attention, but these things don't actually help the people who need guidance. So, if food is one of the things you're focusing on changing this year, my encouragement to you is this: don't grab onto an extreme approach. Look at the full picture, choose something sustainable, and something that supports your high performing life over time. And that advice applies actually whether you're working on nutrition or sleep or movement or relationships or organizing yourself better. Here's the single principle you want to carry with you into this year: stay grounded. You don't need a complete overhaul. You likely already know where you want to go. And you've probably had these goals for a long time. You're probably developing goals from goals you've had before. That's growth. So, same for this year. Choose the next step, take it, repeat it, gather information, and adjust. And most importantly, find your rhythm with it. Rhythm is a core part of how we integrate growth. Let me give you an example from my own life. For many years, I struggled with sleep. I was working out daily, I was working hard, and I was exhausted after work, and I still couldn't sleep. Over time, I became hyper wired, exhausted, but unable to downshift. I was overworked and under recovering, and my nervous system stayed overstimulated. Eventually, I began putting on weight around my middle. And that's something that can absolutely happen under chronic stress, even with exercise and good dietary habits. So I started addressing my stress. Meditation helped, acupuncture helped, but the real shift came later when I started learning about biological rhythms. You see, our bodies are wired with natural rhythms. One that'll be most familiar to you is the circadian rhythm, the sleep wake cycle. What many people don't realize is that we all don't share the same rhythms. Early in my career, I worked at the 92nd Street Y in New York City, and I opened the gym at 5:30 in the morning. I was never an early person. I always tended towards late evenings and falling asleep later. And everyone, including myself, assumed that my body would adapt to this schedule, but it never did. For years, I lived with chronic sleep debt, 5 to 5.5 hours of sleep, dragging myself through the days, feeling half awake. And later, when I had a job in Seoul, South Korea with similar early morning expectations, I continued to push against my natural circadian rhythm. I was tired all the time. And I started internalizing the idea that maybe I just wasn't built for high performance. Eventually, I ran an experiment. I landed a role with a later schedule, and many things changed. I slept, I recovered, my thinking sharpened, my energy stabilized. What we now know is that humans fall along a spectrum of circadian rhythm. Many are early, some are later. And I'm on the early side of the later part of the spectrum. We also have been finding through research that when we consistently fight our natural rhythm, it affects metabolic health, immune function, cardiovascular health, and brain health. Sleep isn't optional maintenance, it's not a luxury, it's biological repair. And how we sleep isn't only determined by our habits before bed, it's shaped by our activities throughout the day, the pace that we work, the breaks that we take, whether or not we take breaks, the way we recover from stress. So, this story isn't meant to only be about sleep, it's about rhythm, the way your body and your brain were designed to work. When people tell me they need more balance, more clarity, more enjoyment of life, or more effectiveness, what I typically find they really need is to find their own natural rhythms and go along with them more closely. Rhythm isn't a wellness preference, it's infrastructure for your optimal performance, especially when your decisions carry weight, when what you do affects others. So, as you make changes this year, I invite you to experiment with working with your biological rhythms. And it helps to have someone to talk to about that kind of stuff. It helps when you're not just doing everything on your own. It makes it more fun to experiment and then share what you're finding with someone else. So that's why I created the membership space for people who like to listen to this podcast. It's a place where you can feel comfortable exploring these ideas and talking to other people about them without the noise and publicity of traditional social media. And this coming month, we're going to focus on rhythm, and I'd love to see you there. I'll put the web address in the show notes. And if this episode resonated with you and you'd like a little more, you're going to enjoy my upcoming guest who connects leadership directly with the nervous system regulation. I'll also link an episode that I appeared on recently that explores this topic more deeply. The host there was also a coach and a writer and a researcher on regulating your nervous system. As always, I'd love to hear if this episode helped you to think differently or take a grounded step forward. Let me know. And please consider rating or following the show. This is Luci Gabel. I'll talk to you next time.